All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our Friends of the Boundary Waters Action Network election preview. We're really excited to be here. We think we have a really fun and exciting program for you today. Today we're joined by former Governor Arne Carlson, Representative Kelly Morrison, and State Senate candidate Jen McEwen. We are going to be talking to them about what's going on in the election and kind of some of the important issues facing the Boundary Waters. But first, I want to tell you a little bit more about who we are and what we do at Friends of the Boundary Waters Action Network. We are a 501c4 affiliate of Friends of the Boundary Waters. We do this for the purpose of getting involved in elections and making advertisements, endorsements, and really doing anything we can to support Boundary Waters champions to the Minnesota legislature. So we also do that through our BWCA PAC, which can make direct contributions to candidates. And we really would like you to check out our website, check out our work, kind of see what we're doing. And if you feel like this is something that you want to get behind, give me a call or give me an email. I'll put them in the chat later, but we're always around and we're always here to answer questions. Maya, are you able to skip forward on the slides?
Well, technical difficulties, I'm working on it.
All right. Well, I think that is 2020 for you. I think everyone has experienced our fair share of that. While Maya works on that, I think I've seen the slides enough so I can kind of go off the top of my head. But I'd like to introduce our three panelists today. First, we have former Governor Arne Carlson. Governor Carlson was governor, so you can see kind of the things that we do. Governor Carlson was governor in the 90s. I think he cost me a couple snow days, but it's all right. We'll forgive him for that one. He's been a really outspoken critic of both twin metals and polymet, and we really, really thank him for his service, something that he's really never stopped doing, even after he stopped office. So we really, really appreciate that. I also want to introduce Representative Kelly Morrison. Kelly was first-time representative from the Deep Haven, Lake Minnetonka area. She is actually one of the few medical doctors, as you can probably tell. She is in office right now. That is the kind of representative Kelly is, still working, helping people get healthy, even though she is facing a very tough race. And that's why we love her. We really appreciate her championing of our issues. She is a huge clean water advocate, as you would probably imagine for anyone living in the Lake Minnetonka area. And then lastly, we have Jen McEwen. Jen McEwen is the DFL endorsed candidate for Senate District 7 in Duluth. Jen beat a longtime incumbent who was a big proponent of copper sulfide mining. And Jen did that, in part by running on her values and running on believing in doing what's right and stopping these polluting mines that threaten twin metals and polymet. So both Jen and Kelly are Action Network endorsed candidates, and we're really excited to have everybody here. So thanks everyone for joining us. Let's get into the questions. I first want to start with Representative Morrison. Kelly, you are a medical doctor, which is one of the few in the legislature. What made you decide to want to run in 2018?
Well, thanks for inviting me today, and thanks to everyone who is here for this issue that we're all so passionate about. I'm one of the people who decided to run for office in the wake of the 2016 election. I was so disheartened by that campaign, and I was unhappy with the outcome. It really propelled me to get more involved. I'm an obstetrician gynecologist. I apologize for the mask, but I'm in the middle of seeing patients. So once we're in the office, the mask never comes off. So bear with me. I hope you can hear me okay. But my career has been in women's health, which is often politicized. And so there are ways in which I feel like I've always been involved with politics, but never in a direct way. So 2016 propelled me to get more involved, and I learned more about what was happening at the local level. I'd sort of always followed national and statewide politics very closely, but not local politics as closely. And I was disappointed to learn who was representing our district in the State House. And one thing led to another. And after several family votes and some soul searching, I decided to run for office. The theme of my campaign was for a healthy, thriving Minnesota. Which felt very appropriate to me as a physician, and it comes from my heart. And to me, that means figuring out how to get everyone the medical care that they need at a price that they can afford. It, of course, means protecting our water and natural resources and addressing the climate crisis. It means supporting education. And so I ran in a district that had never been held by a Democrat before, a really aggressive campaign fueled by a wonderful group of volunteers and interns. We door knocked the district 4 times and won by 216 votes. So a big change for the district, to be sure, but also I think a hopeful sign in a political, in the division that we're experiencing right now in a very purple district. I see that as a strength. We have Democrats and Republicans and independents who live next door to each other, who are friends, who go to church and synagogue together, their kids go to school together. We need more of that, I believe, in this country. And so I see District 33B as a hopeful little microcosm for hopefully the future of our country. And so I'm running again, you know, in the context of the divided legislature that we had, I had some success and I had 14 bills signed into law. I worked hard to reach across the aisle and to work with my colleagues on both sides. And I was a unusual, in some ways, I think, advocate for protecting the boundary waters and protecting our state from the scourge. I see it as the potential of sulfide mining. It's the wrong place for sulfide mining to happen, and I will continue to fight against it if I'm reelected. Working hard to get back there and feeling guardedly optimistic in the days ahead.
That's great. Yeah, we really appreciate you running, and you know, and I'll just remind everyone of 2 things really quick. You know, we will post the links to Jen and Kelly's website if you want to support them. Please do. And also, if you have questions, we'll be taking questions from the audience at the end. So just put them in the Q&A bar and we'll make sure they get answered. The next question, we're going to go to Jen. Jen, you chose to run against a longtime incumbent and won decisively. What made you feel like now was the right time to make that run?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And thank you. I would like to thank you also for this invitation to join this discussion and to have us here. This is just great. I'm really excited to hear from Representative and Dr. Morrison and from Governor Carlson as well. So thanks so much. So yeah, this spring, I, after some soul searching and really in the midst of the beginning of the pandemic, made the decision to challenge our incumbent state senator. And I did that after having been involved here in Duluth with a number of community activists and concerned citizens around natural resource issues, including the copper nickel mining issue, also around just extractive industry in general, the Line 3 project, the sulfite standards in regard to the wild rice, health in Minnesota, various issues that we had seen kind of come through the legislature and seeing our own state senator coming down on those issues in ways that didn't seem reflective of where Duluthians were. Duluth is a very progressive community, and for those of us, most people I think probably watching this have been to Duluth, but Duluth is this beautiful city on a hill coming down to Lake Superior. We're at the zenith of the Great Lakes, right on Lake Superior. We have a large port here in Duluth, the famous aerial lift bridge. We also in our city have are surrounded by abundant and rich natural resources and very clean water. It's around us, it's within our city. We have beautiful greenways and parks. People move to Duluth to live in a sort of quasi-urban area, but also to be close to the beautiful and amazing natural wild places in northern Minnesota. So that's really where Duluth is. That's our identity as a community. And so not seeing those core values reflected in the votes that were coming from our state senator was really troubling. And so there were a number of people talking about, and we weren't getting a lot of responsiveness in raising our concerns with our incumbent. So it did become clear over time that a primary would be really the only way forward to be able to affect change in that area. And so then with the pandemic, there were also a number of issues, and we've heard them raised in the media and throughout this campaign, of just how the pandemic has brought into stark relief the core inequalities and really shortcomings in our systems, whether it be from healthcare to our housing, to the wealth inequality, to the way that we're not really taking the climate crisis by the reins and acting on it. I mean, we were talking about the climate crisis and climate change back when I was a young adult and a teenager, and Governor Carlson was governor of Minnesota. And we've sort of been slow walking these changes and kind of dragging our feet on them. And now it's kind of come home to roost. We're going to have to make some tough decisions, and we're going to have to make some big systemic changes. And I'm really excited to be a part of that. So you know, sometimes when we talk about all the challenges we're facing, it can seem sort of scary because they are big challenges, and it's going to be time for some big change. But it's also really exciting. It really opens up. There's a door about to open up, and a better future is really right around the corner. We're right on the cusp of something new and exciting. And I think that being a part of that is going to be really exciting.
Yeah, that is great, and I think that's something that a lot of you know, myself personally and a lot of our supporters are, you know, really looking to hear. Governor Carlson, you know, you've been involved in this election. You personally endorsed a few candidates this cycle, and two of them happen to be with us today. What is it about leaders like Jen and Kelly, you know, specifically, that made you want to endorse them and get involved to help them out?
You know, I think one of the most effective challenges that was ever given to this country was given by John Kennedy back in 1960. And that was a request that American communities send their best and their brightest. And it's a nice phrase, and we've honored it, frankly, more in the abstract than the specific. But the reality is, American government today is in serious trouble. And part of the reason is that they've delegated power to special interest groups. To interest groups through the use of money can have incredible power over political decisions. And I would draw your attention to a magnificent dialogue that was conducted by Senator Whitehouse in the hearings on the confirmation hearings, talking about the dark money that comes in. So we need people going to our state houses in Minnesota and all over the country, and to Congress and to the White House, who will always remember that our Constitution, our very founding, is premised on the notion that it is the people that we represent. The rest can have a voice. All of us should have a voice, including the special interests. But ultimately, the decision rests on the basis of what is the best for the long-term future of our country. And when you listened to both Kelly and Jen, you heard that passionate commitment to the well-being of others. They didn't talk about themselves. They didn't talk about how they're going to line their pocket. They didn't talk about how it was good for them. What they talked about was the long-term good for all of us. And you got to ask the question, would you like to trust your future in their hands? My answer is an enthusiastic, you bet. That's precisely, I'm an 86-year-old man. And one of the greatest joys that I have is to see a younger generation coming up that really understands the enormity of climate change and how precarious democratic societies are in the United States, France, Italy, Greece, you name it. They're all under fire internally. And we need the kind of compelling leadership that we had in the post-World War II era. And when I see this generation of excellence coming up, that restores my faith and my sense of optimism. So with all due candor, because we've only got 4 or 5 days left in this campaign, I would urge all the people to get out enthusiastically. Let me focus for a moment on Kelly Morrison, because she's got the tight race. Pretend Lake Minnetonka and the adjacent lakes were under fire. And pretend that an industry came in and said, we want to put in some good old-fashioned arsenic and mercury into the waters. You won't mind, will you? Who do you want representing you? And then look at what Jen did. She's already proven the point. She took on the giants all the giants of industry, the mining industry, the governor of the state, the leadership of the legislature. She challenged every single one of them and cleaned house. I have never in my lifetime seen an incumbent state senator to lose an election in a primary to the tune of 73%. That's a walloping. And boy, does it make me feel good.
Absolutely. And we were obviously very heartened by that. And, we are keeping a close eye on Kelly's race. So we really hope that's going to go well. And actually, Kelly, I wanted to have a question for you. In the past 2 years, you've been a chief author or one of the chief authors on a number of bills, but not just bills, environmental bills specifically. Why is it so important that we elect that pro-wilderness majority in 2020?
Well, one of the reasons I ran for office, aside from my concern about the state of political discourse, is this growing concern that I had about this creeping skepticism about science that has been infiltrating our culture and our politics. And I didn't really know what to do about it, except to try to debunk it one conversation at a time with my patients. And so that was another reason that I ran, because I wanted to be a voice for science and for evidence-based policy. And when we look at copper sulfide mining, the science is clear and we've ignored it again and again. This is not safe. And we'll talk more about prove it first, among other things later, but we have to listen to the science. Science is imperfect and it's sometimes slow, as we've learned this year with our challenges with COVID. We are watching science unfold. And so sometimes there are fits and starts. Sometimes we learn new things. That doesn't mean what we knew before was wrong. It's just we had incomplete information. So we have to act on the best available information that we have. And so with that in mind, I did introduce legislation, and I was very proud to sit on the Environment and Natural Resources Finance Division in the House with Rick Hansen as the chair, who's been an incredible environmental advocate over the years. I chief authored a bill that actually called for a review of our mining permitting laws, and specifically a review of the polymet permitting process. That bill did not get a hearing. That bill did not have bipartisan authors, but I will reintroduce it, among others, when reelected. I also did get a bill passed to increase funding for preventing and treating aquatic invasive species. I think that one of the things we have to work so hard to do right now, I think we need all leaders to commit to bringing people together right now. And water is the great unifier in Minnesota. We're all proud of our lakes and our beautiful rivers. And so that is an area where I think we can start to find common ground. And that touches on this mining issue, obviously, in a huge way. I also chief authored a bill called Lawns to Legumes, which provided small grants to individual homeowners to help them transition their traditional lawns into pollinator-friendly habitats. Our pollinator populations have been declining precipitously. They are key to our food supply. And there's some good science that backs up the idea of, even in urban and suburban areas, having just small plots can make a huge difference in boosting our pollinators. So we have a lot of work to do in a lot of different areas, especially in addressing the climate crisis, especially in addressing clean water. But I look forward to continuing that work, and I really hope to continuing to serve on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee.
Good.
Absolutely. And we hope the same. We hope the same. Otherwise, well, we're going to put you to work on our board or something. So everyone make sure to vote for Kelly. Jen, you have been extremely outspoken. We kind of touched on this a little bit about the dangers posed by potential copper sulfide mines, twin metals, and polymet. But sometimes we see people kind of waffling or maybe saying twin metals is bad and polymet is okay, because it is kind of a controversial issue sometimes. Do you feel like taking such a strong stance on a controversial issue hurt you in your campaign?
No, I actually think it helped me. I think that was part of why I had such a large margin of victory in the primary, was the public in Duluth really wanting to see leadership on this issue. I mean, and I should, I always try to remind people that the public is with us on these issues. Whether we're talking about Minnesota as the whole or even up on the range, certainly in Duluth, the majority of the public is very skeptical of these copper nickel mining proposals. They are wanting to learn more, they're wanting leadership, they're wanting a sort of cautionary principle to guide our thinking on this. And I can say too also, up here in Duluth, many of us were watching a Representative Morrison and others in the legislature, and really be so thankful for that voice, for them giving voice to our concerns and our issues that were really our issues. So for someone to sort of step in and kind of buck the conventional wisdom of many people involved in politics up in northeastern Minnesota, that has been the conventional wisdom, is, well, you really have to walk this very careful line on the copper nickel mining because some people are really invested in it. And that it's true that there are some very powerful actors in northeastern Minnesota who have really bet the farm on some of these projects, right? In terms of their power base, in terms of their vision for the future or economic well-being in northeastern Minnesota. So they have a lot invested in that. And so I do think but that's just a very small minority of people who have been invested in that. The issue is that they're very powerful people. There's a lot of money invested in these projects, and we'll talk about Glencore and Antofagasta. And when we have these international mining conglomerates with horrendous records from their workers' rights to environmental, to just their corporate dealings and how they conduct their affairs around the world, coming into our community in northeastern Minnesota with a divide and conquer strategy. And in an environment where people, where we don't have a very meaningful safety net in the United States. I mean, that's where I stand. I don't believe that our safety net is very effective. And so when people are truly, when their healthcare is connected to their employment status, their ability to put their kids through school is affected by their employment status, they don't feel confident that if they're not working, they're afraid literally they will be out on the street. They'll be one of the over 200 people who are literally sleeping outside in Duluth, Minnesota, in tents and in the woods in the winter, who are homeless. So that's a real fear that people have in Minnesota and in the United States in general, that we're not confident that our community is going to take care of our basic needs, right? If I don't have employment, I am scared that my kid's not going to be able to go to the doctor if they need to go to the doctor. I'm scared that I won't be able to make my rent or make my mortgage, and I will literally be out on the street, much less have a good quality of life where I can, enjoy some free time and have a vacation once in a while and spend time with my family. So these economic fears are driving a lot of the way that things have been done in northeastern Minnesota, and they are real fears. They should not be ignored. They need to be addressed at the fundamental level. It's all this interconnectivity of these issues. They really are connected. But back to your original question, no, I don't think it hurt me. I really think there's a lot of power in speaking truth and to speaking to the science and to being real with people about where things are at.
Absolutely. I think that's spot on. And there's two things I'll add to that. Jen made the point that these mines are not something that Minnesotans want, and that's spot on. We've seen polling reflect this, over and over. And in fact, the most recent poll from just this year by Minnesota Public Radio and Star Tribune found that 60% of Minnesotans don't want these mines near the boundary waters. And even 57% of northern Minnesotans don't want these mines. And so, we saw across any demographic, political party, people don't really want these. And if they do, it's a very small percentage, like Jen said. So, that's one huge part. And then I can't speak for anyone else, but at Friends of the Boundary Waters, we recognize that there is an economic need in northeastern Minnesota, and we want to be there to support that, whether that's, Governor Carlson has a number of good ideas on that, whether that's rural broadband, things like that. It just can't be an option that pollutes Lake Superior or the Boundary Waters. And unfortunately, that's what science tells us Twin Meadows and Polymet are. So we encourage those leaders that really want those to think creatively and to move past those ideas, because I think that if they do and they put even half the effort that they do into promoting these mines, we would already have had this problem solved. So just something to consider. Governor Carlson, the next question is for you. Let's just, for a split second, I'm knocking on wood here. Let's say that everything goes great for us on Tuesday. Boundary Waters champions are elected overwhelmingly next week. What do they need to do? What do you want to see from them? And what can they do in the Minnesota legislature to really help the Boundary Waters and protect our clean water?
The first thing is to pay attention. And that sounds simple, but let me be very truthful. The governor has refused to do anything publicly on this issue whatsoever. He will not examine the contract. He will not comment on the contract. He will not push for public hearings. He will not explain the corruption in his own agencies that are now before the court and will be resolved by the court. You have the legislature in both houses, Republicans and Democrats, that did not hold a single hearing and refused to hold a single hearing. Even when the dam in Brazil burst, and even after it was disclosed that the consultant in that dam is the same consultant that's designing the dam in Minnesota, and the damage is assessed now at about $6 billion. No action by the legislature whatsoever, none. So the first thing is to get their attention. I think thanks to these two people, that problem may well be solved. I think now there will be some attention focused on it. But the second part is, and I want to pick up on what Jen said because it's terribly important. I've always listened to the argument that it's a case of jobs. And in order to create jobs, we have to sacrifice the environment. And the environment is something that's out there. No, it's not. It's your drinking water. It's your life. That's what they're talking about. I'd like to have one single person tell me straight out that they're willing to drink water with arsenic and mercury in it. Just one. I put out an idea that nobody wanted to pick up on, and understandably so, but I'm dead serious about it. And that's a pipeline that takes the effluent water that they want the people of Duluth and the tribes to drink down to the State House so the legislators can drink it, and right into the governor's residence so the governor and his staff can drink it. Look at it this way. How many people have you run across that want to move to Flint, Michigan? Well, that's what could happen. Now, there is a way out of it. And we've been talking about this now for over a year, and that is, why can't we move more government jobs, particularly those that pertain to the environment, like the Department of Natural Resources up north? We're talking potentially 300 jobs from the mines. The truth is, we don't know how many jobs there are because they're not guaranteed, and we don't know if they'll even employ Minnesotans. But let's just assume there are 300 jobs. You're telling me that the state of Minnesota, with over 30,000 employees, can't move 300 to the north? Of course they can. But there's been no focus on it. So what I'd like to see are several things. One is, let's recreate the planning agency, but let's also recreate it in a way that it's regional. So you get the inputs of the various regions, and so you can respond to the economic needs of those regions. And that way they have input into the central system. My argument is, if you don't plan for the future then will govern you. And you're always going to have government by surprise. Now, we should be planning. The second thing is, this pandemic has taught us something very important, and that is more and more people can work in their home. And what we're beginning to see in New York City, we're seeing in Washington, D.C., it's part of Minneapolis, St. Paul, it's going to be all, it's St. Cloud, et cetera, it's going to be all over the place. More people are saying, I think I'd like to live in the rural areas and maybe come physically to work once a week or once every 2 weeks, but I can work long distance. Well, that means we have to have the science and the technology necessary to allow that. Well, you got to plan for that. We shouldn't be talking about what we can do to preserve an old economy. We should be talking about how we can plan for a new economy and create far more jobs. I give a great deal of credit to Joe Biden for talking about a new economy. And then you look at the job numbers that he's talking about, they're astronomical. That's a pleasant piece of news for Minnesota and a pleasant piece of news for those in northern Minnesota. So it can be done. On the political side, what I'd like to see, and I know that Kelly's already involved in it, and I think other legislators will be, including Jen, and that is the prove it first. Wisconsin's been doing this for years. It was abolished under Governor Walker. But prior to that, both political parties sort of embraced it. Let's say it was an uncomfortable relationship. But basically what it meant is if you think, you, the mining company, think you have a safe technology, tell us one mine that you've operated for the last 10 years that shows that. That's fair. The second part, which is far more controversial, but I think it has to be done. And that is increasingly our legislative bodies are becoming pawns, if you will, of special interest groups. When you look at the caucus system, all four caucuses, Democrat and Republican, the House and the Senate, and you look at their disclosure statements of where the money comes from, they all look identically alike, and it's 100% from the lobbying community. And then you wonder why government is tilt in their direction. I'd like to see that abolished. We do it in the courts. Just imagine if you had a court case and you went to the court and you found out the judge had already taken a few $1,000s from the person you're suing. You think that's a fair trial? But that's what the legislative bodies in Minnesota and all over the United States do. It has to stop. We have to put on the table public funding once and for all. The public's interest cannot be compromised.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Governor Carlson. And actually, this next question, this will be our last question for the group, and then we'll start taking some from the audience, but you touched right on it. We want to talk a little bit about something called a Prove It First law. And this is something that the Friends of the Boundary Waters, along with a number of other environmental groups, are going to be, lobbying for and pushing for at the next session. And essentially what it is like Governor Carlson said, we don't think this kind of mining can be done safely. But if you think it can, show us one example in the United States or Canada where this mine operated for 10 years and was closed for 10 years without polluting, because that's what happens. A lot of times they'll just bail. And that's exactly what Governor Carlson is talking about here, that will leave us on the hook, right? And so that's kind of what we're trying to avoid with this. If it's never been done safely, why would we make Minnesota be the guinea pig for it? And that's how we feel. So I just want to ask, Kelly, I obviously know that you were involved, with trying to get some of this bill last year and are going to be involved again. So we'll start with you. What do you think about Prove It First, and why is it so important?
I think Prove It First is brilliant, and it gets right to the heart of why we should not allow this kind of mining in Minnesota, because the science is very clear that it cannot be done safely. The reason that's an effective law, and it's also called a mining moratorium law, is because that study does not exist. That mine does not exist. Sulfide mining has never been done without an accident. And we're not talking about small consequences. Aside from taking apart beautiful land, polluting the air as well as the water, forever altering these precious landscapes, we're talking about acidifying water, harming the fish and other aquatic life that live in those bodies of water. And we're talking about leaching heavy metals into the water, lead, mercury, arsenic. As an obstetrician, that is horrifying to me, to think about women and pregnant women and children consuming water that has heavy metals in it. We know what that does to fetal development. And so I think Prove It First is brilliant because it gets right to the heart of the problem with sulfide mining. It cannot be done safely.
Absolutely. We concur. Jen, how do you feel about Prove It First? Obviously you're going to be, in your first legislative session, knock on wood again, all things going well. Where you stand on Prove It First?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better than Representative Morrison. That is, I wholeheartedly support the Prove It First legislation, and I think it was it was really wise that Wisconsin had that legislation when it did. You know, and being from Duluth in particular, and I grew up here, my family, generations back on both sides, are from Duluth. And so this community is where my heart is. And the idea that we would allow this type of exploitation and to be left holding the bag on this type of mining that would be a clear, I don't even want to say would be a danger, but really would actually negatively impact the health of so many of my neighbors and my family and our communities downstream, and is it's a really scary prospect. And I think that Duluthians have been paying attention to the copper nickel mining debates, in particular because we are downstream. We're a downstream community. Our water comes right out of Lake Superior. And our economy in Duluth is based on having this clean water here, that we're living on this amazing body of clean water, Lake Superior. So it is a deep concern and an identity piece for me in terms of preventing this type of exploitation from going forward that would negatively impact my community in so many ways. And as Representative Morrison said, you know, once the door is open to this, there's no going back. You know, it's not as if, even if, you know, a lot of people who are in support of this or kind of flirt with the idea of being in support of it say, well, if we can get the financial assurances in place, you know, then maybe we could clean it up if there's ever a problem. No, once that happens, it's too late. People are poisoned. Our environment has been ruined in a large part. What we value about our identity in this place where we live, that we are a part of, that is part of us, we can't allow the poisoning of that. So I wholeheartedly support the Prove It First. And it is connected also to this larger fear that Duluthians are really cued into, which is the understanding that if PolyMet does go forward and is developed, and if Twin Metals then also were to be developed, our understanding is that that is just the beginning, that there are a whole host of mining conglomerates and proposed projects set up to develop the entire Duluth complex, which runs just north of my house here in Duluth, northeast Duluth, all the way up to the range. I mean, can you imagine our northeastern Minnesota ripped up to send in the wealth of this land and this water and to monetize it and to ship that out to a bunch of billionaires? Are you kidding me? No, no, there's no way that Duluthians are going to be okay with this. And I'm really glad that we're moving forward with the Prove It First.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that is, you know, a key point is that we always say two mines, one threat, because we really do believe, you know, if this is too dangerous for the boundary waters, it's too dangerous for Lake Superior. But these are just the projects that are most far along. You know, they're the furthest along in the process. There's a mine that threatens the Mississippi River. There's a mine that threatens the St. Croix River. You know, and there's other mines that threaten both of these watersheds. So it really is just the beginning. You know, and Governor Carlson, what we're going to go to the questions from the audience now. And one of the questions is specifically about Twin Metals, right? That's the project right outside the boundary waters. However, it's on federal land. The question is, does the state of Minnesota have the power to stop this project, or what can the state of Minnesota do if it's on the federal land?
Well, it's, as I understand it, the permitting process rests with the state of Minnesota. Am I correct on that?
Yep. And so I'll give people a little bit of a background on this. You know, the state of Minnesota decided to do their own permitting process. You know, either way, any mine that operates in Minnesota will have to get permits.
Process that we feel has been corrupted and is now in court. But let me let me back up here for a moment and pick up on what Jen said. There isn't a single mining company that's willing to assume the liability for the potential damage. None. What Glencore did, just so everybody understands, when this show is over, Google Glencore and start to look up the litany of lawsuits that have been filed against it and prevailed, and the number of continents involved. This was a company that was invented, created by Mark Rich. Mark Rich was convicted of income tax evasion in the United States. And then he received a presidential pardon on unfortunately, Bill Clinton's last day. And then he went out and brought together a whole series of mining industry and created this enormous entity called Glencore. Glencore spun out Polymet as a shell corporation. It has no assets, only debts, and its debts are to Glencore. But the contract is with Polymet. So the moment the accident occurs, Polymet rolls over and says, I don't have anything, I can't pay a nickel, and they can't. We're left holding the bag. Vale Corporation in Brazil was held liable for their damage, and it's $6 billion. Now think about it. Who's going to pay the $6 billion? We know one person who's not going to pay, and that's Glencore. Glencore is not going to pay a single nickel. They made that very clear to us. And here we have our political system, our elected officials, not willing to publicly review the contract that the taxpayers are liable for. That's unbelievable. Now let me be even more blunt if I can be. Suppose when I was governor, I said, look, I've got a good economic project that may create some new jobs, but it's with the mafia. How would everybody reacted? Why are we in bed with Glencore? Where is our sense of ethics, our sense of morality, our sense of decency, but more importantly, our common sense? These people are sharks. They've already swum away from every single disaster they created. In South America, in Africa, Great Britain is now suing them. The United States government is suing them. What in the world are we doing involving ourselves in any kind of a relationship with them? That's the most central question.
Absolutely. And you know, this next question kind of ties in with that as well. And this is for both Representative Morrison and Jen. How can we enlighten the public, you know, about these issues? In addition to, you know, someone who's maybe written some letters to the editor, you know, maybe gone to the court challenges, you know, what else can they do to bring this issue, you know, attention and make a change on this issue?
I mean, I think that the polling that was done this summer was very compelling. And I think that helped to educate a lot of people who maybe didn't participate directly in the polling, because I think a lot of people had this sense, this growing understanding about the mining, the copper mining specifically, that, gee, that just doesn't seem right. I don't know that much about it. People often talk about how complicated it is. There are a lot of issues. It's really not that complicated. We've sort of made it complicated with all the permitting and everything else, but the crux of it, the basic issues, are not complicated. Governor Carlson just highlighted these foreign conglomerates coming in to take stuff out of our land and our water, pollute it, and then leave, maybe creating a few temporary jobs, despoiling the landscape and the water, poisoning our children, and then leaving every taxpayer in Minnesota with a bill. It really makes very little sense when you break it down to its basic elements. So I think that continuing, again, that polling I think was huge toward educating people that you're not alone. Most Minnesotans are not for this, including, as Scott highlighted, the people who live there, who you would think in many ways would be most against it. But I think it's important to, and I noticed in one of the questions, someone referenced how, you know, people on the range and people in every community don't like other communities. I think this is probably particularly true in areas of greater Minnesota. I don't want St. Paul telling me how to live my life. The problem is our interconnectedness, as we've learned this year, has never been more apparent. everything that we do impacts each other. And this issue touches every Minnesotan. It touches people who live near these mines most directly, most immediately, but it impacts the entire state because it could bring down our economy. It will harm our health. It will ruin our outdoor recreational industry. The ripple effects are enormous. And so anything all of us can do to continue to elevate this issue is so important. And we will introduce Prove It First when we are elected. I'm also going to introduce a bill that would mimic Betty McCollum's bill on the federal level, so that on the state level, we can protect the watershed of the boundary waters so that mining cannot be done there. No, we won't even consider permits there. I also introduced a bill last year to remove the job of mining promotion from DNR, because I think that there's some legacy thinking there that DNR should be in the business of promoting mining. DNR should be in the business of protecting our natural resources.
Absolutely.
Yes, bravo. That's so true. And I think that before those results of the different surveys testing people's testing approval for these proposals came out, there was this sense, especially in Duluth and on the range, you would hear it from people that, well, people up on the range want this. They really want this type of mining. Or even in Duluth, you would hear people, especially in politics, saying, well, you know, I guess this is the next type of mining. This is what we're going to have to do. And when that survey did come out with showing those numbers, it was really validating, again, that this is just the power that this small group of actors have to sort of manufacture this sense of approval for this type of mining that doesn't exist. And that's I think goes to the money in our politics and the type of the ways in which, you know, some powerful actors in politics and in industry can act together to create this sort of feeling in the business community and in the public that, well, this is just what everybody wants. This is going to bring jobs. This is the next thing, when in fact, the public already is pretty well educated enough to know that this is going to be a problem. This is not something that we support. And so, you know, for people who are wondering what they can do, I mean, writing letters to the editor, all of that is really great. And one of the things that I know has been great for me these past years is to have worked with a local organization. I've been working with Duluth for Clean Water over the years, which is a local group of Duluth concerned citizens and volunteers who we just got together and started working on the polymet issue and raising awareness. And that has been really effective in Duluth in particular, in kind of educating everybody about what this would mean, about these different aspects and countering that narrative.
Scar, one of the things that we should remember is that during the course of our lifetime, the value of water has significantly increased. I don't want to ask you because I'm not sure how old you are, but 50 years ago.
I'll be 30 next week. Don't remind me.
That is before your time. If somebody came to you 50 years ago and said, look, I want to bottle some water and sell it, they would have been laughed out of existence. Now it's a huge industry. Water is one of the most valuable commodities that the world has. And the biggest body of fresh water are the Great Lakes. Now, think of it from a corporate perspective. Can you imagine any corporation sitting down and saying, we're going to take our most valuable asset and we're going to subject it to the likelihood of permanent destruction in order to create this over here? Nobody would do that. It's an irrational decision economically. Forget about all the rest. Economically, it's a totally irrational decision. We ought not to be engaged in it. But the more people find out about this thing, of course, the more they turn against mining. But I think we can go back to the fact that we can create a state of Minnesota that's sensitive to all the regional needs understands the new dynamics and opportunities created by the pandemic to have people live further away from their places of employment, thereby enhancing, if you will, access to rural Minnesota and strengthening the economic areas of rural Minnesota. There's a lot of upside potential here, and that's the part that's not being discussed.
Absolutely. You know, and one thing I'll just add, for anyone that is looking to get more involved, you may see a blank screen from Maya Swope. She is our new outreach coordinator, and she is really doing an excellent job of putting together a citizen action network, which will be, you know, we're going to be relying on you to to do these exact kind of things, write letters to editors, share important news, come to, you know, the court case when it's safe, you know, things like that. And so if you want to get involved with that, please shoot me or Maya an email. Maya will post our emails in the chat. But, you know, if you want to get more involved, please let us know. We're going to have about time for about, you know, one or two more questions. This one, Governor Carlson, someone wants to know, you know, we've seen Governor Walz, as you kind of mentioned, kind of sit on the fence on this one. You know, we know that some of the people in his cabinet, unfortunately, have actually worked, you know, have been a lawyer for some of these mining companies, things like that. But we also know that, you know, he has expressed publicly concern about, you know, the environment, things like that. How can citizens get him off the fence? How can they pressure him in a constructive way to see our side of the
First of all, let's not make excuses for that kind of behavior. Seriously. I've never heard a single candidate run for public office on the grounds that they'll be undecided, indecisive, and uncertain about anything. That's nonsense. The two top members of the governor's staff were in the law firm that represented Polymet. One of them was the outside attorney for Polymet. The person he appointed to the Board of Ethics to oversee campaign finance laws is a Polymet person. There's no question where the governor stands. The real issue is he doesn't want to be public about it because he too reads the polls. So this is about the protection politically of the old system versus the emerging needs of a new system. And when we saw the election of Jen in Duluth, that sent the wave through the whole system that the new economy, the new ideas, the new opportunities are coming forth. And the Democratic Party is going to have to recognize that. That's going to be their strength from the future. And then when you have people like Kelly Morrison trying to awaken up this big sleeping giant known as the metropolitan Minnesota, how would they like their lakes subject to this kind of treatment? The answer is no, absolutely not. That's why the polls are going up. So I think, and I'm being terribly political here, and I do not apologize for it because I think we need to be blunt. At this point in time, I don't see the Republican Party as anything other than locked up in Donald Trump. But the problem is a piece of the Democratic Party is also locked up in Donald Trump, particularly on this issue. There is no separation between the governor of Minnesota and the president of the United States on Polymet. That unfortunately is the reality. And so I think it's very important that legislators understand they have to be independent when they go there. They have to put the betterment of the people as their number one priority. That's who they represent. Then the rest of them will slowly defect. You wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sentiment is exactly why we have a couple of people in the comments saying, please tell Mr. Carlson to run again. If he's in good health, why not?
I'm having enough trouble walking around.
Well, we appreciate you sharing your thoughts. You know, I want to end with, you know, and if we didn't have a chance to get your questions, again, please shoot me an email. Please shoot Maya an email. We'll do our best to respond as soon as possible. But, you know, I do want to end with a question for Jen and Kelly, just simply, what can people do to help you guys out in these last 5-6 days? You know, it's really important. As we said, we know Kelly's race is really important, you know, and electing Jen is huge because of what she stood for. So what can people do if they want to get involved and make a difference in these last few days?
Do you want to go
Jen,
first,
you go
Kelly?
ahead.
I'll go first. I'll let you finish. Well, one of the things that I just wanted to let people know, to leave people with, is this work that all of us are doing around this issue. It is working. It's working. So keep doing the work, the good work that you're doing to educate your neighbors and your family and your community about this type of mining and just how distinctly different it is from what we've done before. how it would be ruinous for our watersheds, just how valuable we're sitting on this clean water, and just how valuable that is going to be going into the future and this next economy that we're moving into. So keep it up, everybody. Really great work. One of the things that people can do to help people like me out is to help us flip the Minnesota Senate to a strong DFL majority. As we know, we do have, as Governor Carlson was just talking about, some division within the DFL party as well around this issue because of just these powerful interests in the way that they have pushed these projects. And so we need not only a majority by 1 or 2, that would be great, but we could use a real majority so that we can really move forward on a prove it first legislation and all of the wonderful pieces of legislation that Representative Morrison was discussing in detail earlier. We'll be able to make some great progress if we can get some people who are truly devoted to the public good, public health, moving forward on the transition to clean energy and protecting our clean water. So in as much as people can help with those dicey races, there's a number of them in the metro area that are pretty close. People can make calls, get out there and help those candidates who are in those tight races. That will help all of us. It will help people like me to be able to get more movement at the legislature.
We should let that be the final word because it was so great. But for the political junkies who are tuned in today, go to the Friends website and look for their Boundary Waters champion candidates. Check to make sure that if one of them is in your district, that you vote for them and you get all your friends and relatives to vote for them. That is so key because there is this legacy thinking in the DFL in some corners, I think, that it's either jobs or it's environment. And it's old thinking. We can do both and we must do both. So look for the junkies of you out there. Look on the list of candidates, check out the ones who are in tight races and do everything you can to make sure that they get over the finish line. And thank you so much, everyone who tuned in today. Fantastic. I wish we could get to all those great questions, but never hesitate to reach out to me directly if you have a question. My campaign email, I can put in the chat. It's kelly@morrisonforhouse.com. And hopefully my official email will be up and running again, but we'll see.
And I'll just simply close on this. I wholeheartedly support what both of them are saying. I do believe that if substantial majorities are elected in both the House and the Senate, I think we can see the reforms necessary that will coalesce, at least in this case, the Democratic Party towards an agenda that is more future oriented. And then I honestly and truly pray that the Republican Party can go back to its previous strength in moderation and become a genuinely competing party, but competing not on the goals and objectives, but competing on the how-to. We need a good, strong two-party system. And right now, frankly, we don't have it. But I think what you've done is marvelous. And I thank the environmental groups for the lawsuits they filed because they're the ones who kept this whole thing alive.
Well, I think I'm obviously going to have to leave it on you praising us and praising our environmental groups. So thank you for that. I will say, like was mentioned, if you want, go to www.bwcapac.org. Don't go to the Friends C3 website. Go to bwcapac.org. That is our political website. You can find, as Kelly mentioned, all our Boundary Waters champions. Everyone that we interviewed and endorsed expressed opposition to twin metals, opposition to PolyMet, and interest in Prove It First. So these aren't just handed out endorsements. These are all people that really are willing to stand up for it. And if you're interested, we did name 20 top tier races that were most important to electing a Boundary Waters majority. Kelly is our #1 race. And Jen also is a top 10 race for us. So, those are really important ones. And if you want to know more, just again, shoot me an email. We can get you all those. So, I'll get you out of here on time. Thank you, Governor Carlson. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Representative Morrison, so much for your time. We appreciate you being here. And we really appreciate the work that you're doing. And we look forward to working with you more. So thanks for taking the time. Thanks for everybody for watching. And we really, really appreciate it. Go vote.
Thanks,
We'll leave it at that.
everybody. This was so fun.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.